This video is brought to you by manscaped.com. Find out more later on. Hey, 42 here. In the 1891 Sherlock Holmes story, The Red-Headed League, two men gain access to a bank vault by tunneling their way through the floor. Unfortunately for them, Sherlock Holmes is one step ahead and is already inside the vault, awaiting their arrival. Now, for most of us, after finishing a short story such as The Red-Headed League, we're likely to finish off our cocoa, turn off our nightlight, and go to bed. But not professional criminal Anthony Gavin. Where others saw the Sherlock Holmes tale as a light-hearted piece of literary entertainment, Gavin saw a step-by-step guide on how to rob a bank. In fact, Gavin was so impressed by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's bank robbing blueprint that in 1971, he decided he was going to put it to the test. The result was one of the most audacious bank heists in British history, with millions of pounds worth of valuables stolen from safety deposit boxes locked away in an apparently unbreakable bank vault in central London. That in itself is pretty interesting, but even more intriguingly, the heist may just have uncovered a royal scandal in the process, one that's been hushed up for decades. More on that a little later. Well, Christmas has come early this year because I've just been gifted a new performance package by Manscaped, and it's awesome. Let's check it out, and trust me, your jingle balls will thank you. Firstly, we've got the Lawnmower 4.0. This waterproof cordless trimmer is built with advanced skin-safe technology, which actually helps you to reduce nasty nicks and cuts on your most sensitive areas. And it also has this cool LED light, which is really helpful for grooming during these cold, dark winter nights. Now here's a stocking stuffer for you. It's Manscaped's Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant and Crop Reviver Ball Toner Spray. These are absolute game changers. Oh, and did I mention, it also smells really good. Now, gents, Manscaped is no longer for just below the waist grooming. They have you covered from head to toe, quite literally, with their new and improved Shears 2.0. Their luxury 6-piece stainless steel nail kit. Honestly, every guy out there needs to be putting Manscaped on their wish list this season, especially because for a limited time, you'll also get 2 free gifts: the Shed travel bag and the Manscaped anti-chafing boxer briefs. That's literally a gift on top of a gift. So don't wait around. Go to manscaped.com/42 to get 20% off, plus free international shipping, plus 2 free gifts. Your balls and your body will thank you. Before Gavin could begin tunneling his way into a bank vault like some giant money-hungry badger, he first needed to choose a suitable target, and it seemed he had an eye for symbolism, because he ended up selecting a branch of Lloyd's Bank that just so happens to be situated on the corner of London's Baker Street, home of the illustrious detective that had inspired Gavin in the first place. With his target located, Gavin began meticulously planning a crime that would come to be known as the Baker Street Robbery. To execute his plan, Gavin would need to assemble a crack team of accomplices, each of whom would be given a specific job. First on the list was Reginald Tucker, a used car salesman whose job it would be to gain access to the vault before the robbery took place. Bank policy at the time allowed customers to enter the vault on their own, meaning all Tucker had to do to get a closer look at the target was rent a safety deposit box. No doubt, the bank's employees assumed Tucker was just another wealthy customer there to gaze upon whatever secret valuables he was storing in his box. But in reality, as soon as he was left alone in the vault, he began measuring its exact dimensions. This stage of the plan was crucial, since the gang needed to know exactly where to dig their tunnel. Of course, waltzing into the vault with a tape measure might have raised a few eyebrows. So, Tucker undertook his measuring duties using the width of his arms an umbrella, and the conveniently positioned floor tiles, which were each exactly 23 centimeters long. Next on the list to join Gavin's gang was Thomas Stevens, who incidentally was another used car salesman. Now, I'm not saying all used car salesmen are untrustworthy, but on this evidence, it's probably best to get a second opinion on that odometer reading before you hand over your cash. Stevens' job was simple. It was down to him to acquire the tools needed to overcome the heist's final boss, the meter-thick reinforced concrete floor that led to the vault. Other members of the gang included Benjamin Wolfe, who leased the shop 2 doors down from the bank that would serve as the base from which they would begin tunneling, and Bobby Mills, a lookout, whose job it was to update the gang of any suspicious activity in the area. Finally, BAFTA award-winning comedian and television personality Ricky Skinny Gervais was drafted in to take care of the vault's burglar alarm. Oh, sorry, that's Mickey Skinny Gervais. I'm always getting those two mixed up. It's widely accepted that there were far more people involved in this crime than just the core crew, but their identities remain a mystery to this day. One person often associated with the burglary is the infamous Brian Reeder, who years later would be jailed for his involvement in the Hatton Garden heist, a crime that bore an uncanny resemblance to the Baker Street robbery. Many are convinced that Reeder was a member of Gavin's gang, but he always maintains that he played no part in that job. Then again, he would say that, wouldn't he? Marv from Home Alone aside, most career criminals avoid confessing to their crimes. Now that the gang was assembled, they were faced with the daunting prospect of digging the tunnel and breaking into the vault. The tunnel needed to be more than 12 meters long in order to pass between the Chicken Inn restaurant that sat between the gang's hideout and the bank. So, to save time, the team kept it as small as possible. Shawshank Redemption style, the entrance was under 40 centimeters across and the exit closer to 30. It was backbreaking work regardless. Gavin would later claim to have lost more than 2 stone in the month or so it took to excavate the tunnel. The only time in history anyone has ever lost weight in the vicinity of the Chicken Inn on Baker Street. By the time the tunnel was finished, only one thing stood in the way of the team and their loot. Unfortunately, that one thing happens to be a meter thick and made of reinforced concrete, the vault floor. It was time for heavy-duty equipment specialist Thomas Stevens to prove his worth. First, he tried breaking through the concrete using an industrial jack, capable of exerting a force of 100 tons. But instead of cracking the concrete above, it simply drove itself into the floor of the tunnel. Next, he tried a thermic lance, which is basically a real-life version of a lightsaber, capable of cutting through steel with pure heat. When even that didn't work, Stevens began to lose his patience. None of the fancy tools he'd gone to so much trouble to acquire were working. It was time to bring out the big guns. Well, explosives. Gelignite, to be specific. The crew had wanted to avoid the use of explosives, for obvious reasons. They're a little on the loud side for a secret bank robbery, but they overcome this issue by timing the blasts to coincide with heavy traffic noise from the street above. A couple of controlled explosions later, and they were in. Up to this point, it seemed like everything was going pretty swimmingly. They'd managed to dig a 12-meter tunnel, resisted the temptation of fried chicken, and gained entry to the bank vault, all without raising any suspicions. Or at least, that's what they thought. You see, the team had been communicating via walkie-talkies throughout the heist. It had seemed like a good idea on paper. They were spread out in various locations in and around the bank. Excavators in the tunnel, lookouts on nearby rooftops, that sort of thing. Walkie-talkies meant instructions could be given out to everyone quickly and efficiently. But there was a problem. Someone else had been listening in. That someone was Robert Rowlands, a home radio enthusiast with a name like a superhero's alter ego from a Stan Lee comic. Rowlands had been attempting to tune in to Radio Luxembourg, as one does, and kick back and relax for the evening. But any notion of a quiet night brushing up on his Luxembourgish was quickly ended when, vigorously twiddling his knob, he suddenly found himself listening in on a live burglary. After convincing himself that no, this wasn't some kind of hyper-realistic radio drama, Rowlands did what any good citizen would do and informed the local police. Of course, the boys in blue immediately sprang into action, alerted all departments, and headed out into the night to apprehend the criminals. Oh, no, wait, this was the 70s, which meant they did none of those things. In fact, instead of, stopping one of the biggest crimes of the century, the officer on duty told Rowlands to bugger off and stop making prank calls. Luckily, Rowlands was undeterred, so he got back onto his radio, slipped a cassette into the tape deck, and began to record an argument between the gang members about whether or not they should take a break or continue tunneling towards the vault. Apparently, even the world's greatest criminals have HR issues. Now armed with hard evidence, Rowlands gave the police another call, though this time he went straight to Scotland Yard. The Metropolitan Police Headquarters dispatched members of its flying squad to Rowlands' house to listen to the tapes and any other live radio conversations the gang might accidentally broadcast throughout the night. By the way, the flying squad, nicknamed the Sweeney, is a branch of the police that's dedicated to investigating organised crime, and not a group of flying police officers who swoop down on unsuspecting criminals in the dead of night like truncheon-wielding superheroes. More's the pity. The police sat with Rowlands through the night, listening in on the gang's intermittent radio conversations, which confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt that a large-scale bank heist was indeed underway in London. The only problem was, at no point did the crooks happen to conveniently mention which particular bank they were in the process of robbing. With no way of knowing where exactly the crime was taking place, the police were left with little choice but to go and investigate every single bank in the vicinity, all 750 of them. At 749 of those banks, absolutely nothing of interest was happening. But at one, the Baker Street branch of Lloyd's, a bunch of hardened criminals were busy emptying the vault of its priceless contents. The police arrived on the scene when the heist was still in full swing, but when they got down to the bank's vault, they found it sealed with a time lock, a device that prevented access apart from at certain times of the day. So, what did these seasoned police officers do in the face of this mighty time-based obstacle that could have been overcome by literally doing nothing for a little bit? Let me tell you, they assumed everything was probably totally fine in there and just moved on to the next bank. Whilst nobody knows for sure, it's thought that the robbers were very likely still inside the vault when the police arrived, no doubt soiling their collective underwear whilst firing off prayers to every deity in the dictionary. Unsurprisingly, considering how close they'd come to getting caught, the gang didn't stick around for long after that. But it wasn't until the following day that the location of the crime was finally discovered. When it was, staff at the bank found that 268 safety deposit boxes had been relieved of their contents, amounting to somewhere in the region of £3 million of loot. To add insult to injury, one of the gang members had scrawled, "Let's see how Sherlock Holmes solves this one," across the wall of the vault. As you probably already know, being a cocky twat invariably elicits some kind of good old-fashioned instant karma from the universe. And this was no exception, because the police weren't going to need a fictional detective with near supernatural powers of deduction to solve this case. You see, one of the gang members, Benjamin Wolfe, whose job it had been to secure the shop 2 doors down from the bank, appeared to have skipped the first day of crime school and had failed to use a fake name when signing his lease papers. And so, before long, the police were knocking on his door to ask him if he knew anything about a certain 12-metre tunnel they'd found in the middle of his shop floor. The arrests soon followed, with 4 members of the gang convicted for their involvement in the Baker Street robbery. Anthony Gavin, Thomas Stevens, and Reg Tucker each received 12-year sentences, whilst Benjamin Wolfe received a slightly more lenient 8-year sentence on account of his age. He was in his 60s at the time. The police then turned their attention to the real crime lord in this story, Robert Rowlands, the amateur radio enthusiast who'd alerted them to the burglary in the first place. That's right, proving the age-old adage that no good deed goes unpunished, the police seriously considered prosecuting Rowlands for listening in on unlicensed radio transmissions. Fortunately, they eventually came to their senses and decided against it. Lloyds Bank, on the other hand, were far more grateful and awarded Rowlands £2,500 for his efforts. Although 4 of the gang members were put behind bars, this was far from a decisive victory for the police. As I've already mentioned, to this day nobody really knows how many people were involved in the heist, and it's thought that several of the conspirators managed to evade capture. If that's true, I can only assume those men or women enjoyed a pretty great retirement somewhere sunny, because only £231,000 of the estimated millions that were stolen was ever recovered. But what about that royal scandal I mentioned at the start of the video? Well, for those of you wondering, the Queen wasn't in the tunnel with the thermic lance, unfortunately. No. Soon after the burglary, rumours began to surface that one of the safety deposit boxes contained compromising photographs of the Queen's sister, Princess Margaret, on a Caribbean island with British actor John Bindon, who was known to have strong ties with the criminal underworld. A love affair with such an unscrupulous character would have been a huge scandal for the royals, and no doubt they would have done everything in their power to prevent the photographs from being leaked to the press, and ultimately the public. Though, let's face it, even when they do manage to dodge one scandal, you don't usually have to wait too long for another one to come around. Sorry, Mom. Interestingly enough, despite this being one of the biggest and boldest burglaries in British history, the press appeared to mysteriously lose interest in the story soon after the events unfolded, and it's been suggested that MI5 put a gagging order in place on behalf of the royal family to hush the whole thing up. Of course, it goes without saying that the gang will have seen some things they were never meant to see as they rifled through the safety deposit boxes in the vault of Lloyds Bank. But whether or not one of those things happened to be Princess Margaret's boobs is sadly unknown. Having said that, it might not stay that way. You see, whilst most of the documents relating to the police investigation were made public back in 2013, locked away in a vault somewhere are 800 pages that were, for reasons unknown, kept back. Eventually, those papers will be declassified and released to the general public. And when that happens, the contents of those safety deposit boxes may finally be revealed. Unfortunately, that isn't scheduled to happen until January 2071, and we might all be dead by then. If only there was some way of accessing the vault sooner. Where the hell did I put my thermic lance? Thanks for watching.